Bambu Lab PETG-HF is my absolute favorite filament, but it has one big problem, because it's constantly sold out and was unavailable for months. Regular PETG, way too slow to print, and the glossy surface just doesn't look premium. I claim there are filaments that can handle high-speed printing and visually come close to PETG-HF. So I tested 4 alternatives to find out if any of them can truly replace PETG-HF. And even though my test results were pretty clear, a look at the datasheet flipped everything on its head again. Hi, my name is Niels and you're watching Perspective 3D. When I tested Bambu Lab PETG-HF, it was obvious. This isn't regular PETG. It's as fast as PLA, with a matte PLA-like look, but UV and weather resistance like standard PETG. Your feedback shows you love it too. My first video on it has over 20,000 views and is still growing. But there's a problem. Over the past months, PETG-HF in particular hasn't been available in the Bambu Lab store. And that's frustrating. Your projects stall because you ran out of filament, or in the worst case, you have to reprint everything again. To end this once and for all, I tested 4 candidates to find a true replacement, or to confirm that PETG-HF really is irreplaceable. For a fair comparison, I'm checking 4 things: print quality, appearance, price and sustainability. As alternatives, I choose the Elegoo Rapid PETG, the Creality Hyper PETG, Sunlu Highspeed Matte PETG and Jayo Rapid Matte PETG. For the first test, I need the right model. A benchy or a calibration cube isn't enough. They won't reliably reveal each filament's weaknesses. We need a model that combines 3 things. First, long straight surfaces printed at high speed. Second, overhangs and curves where the printer slows down and where any flaws show up immediately. And third, areas where flow constantly starts and stops, so typical PETG issues like stringing consistently appear. And that's exactly why, just like in the PETG-HF video, I again went with this honeycomb basket by Eternity Labs. It checks all 3 boxes: fast print sections, overhangs and curves, plus the demanding honeycomb structure, which is basically a built-in overhang test and instantly shows if a filament tends to string. But if you, like I initially did, hope to just grab the PETG-HF profile and hit print, I have to disappoint you. Because that's exactly what I tried first. Load a new filament, select the PETG-HF profile in Bambu Studio and start the print. The result was pretty underwhelming. Strings between the honeycombs, filament build-ups and messy edges. So what to do? Every filament behaves differently in terms of print properties, so it quickly became clear I had to tweak the parameters. In plain English, you might get lucky and the Bambu Lab profiles will work with other brands' filaments, but if they don't, you need to make your own filament profile. Don't worry, here are 3 simple steps for my calibration method before we jump into the test. Step 1. Create a new profile in Bambu Studio by duplicating an existing one that's close to your new filament, ideally the PETG-HF profile. Second, run the so-called flow dynamics calibration, a semi-automatic test where your printer makes small patterns and you choose which one looks best. Be sure to use pattern as the method and set value step to 0.002. On the finished print, find the corner that's neither over nor under extruded. Third, the final step. Filament manufacturers always specify a printing temperature range. As a rule of thumb, go higher when you print faster so the materials flows better. But the optimal temperature can depend on your printer, and that's why I printed a temperature tower where each section is printed a bit hotter than the last one. To my surprise, all candidates looked best at this temperature. So I set that value in the profile and now I'm ready for the final test. Quick disclaimer, these 3 steps are just a minimum optimization, but thanks to the Pareto principle, you get pretty good results without spending hours tuning your filaments. If you know a better calibration method, let me know in the comments. Now for the moment of truth. I dried each filament for 8 hours and printed the honeycomb basket with our optimized profile. For comparison, There's also a PETG-HF print using the standard Bambu Lab PETG-HF profile. Let's start with the Creality Hyper PETG. Apart from some very minimal stringing, there are no signs of residual moisture. The curves on the handles and corners are clean, and the top edges of the honeycombs only sag very slightly. The surface isn't really matte, it has the typical PETG gloss. To be fair, Hyper PETG isn't marketed as a matte PETG. It's more of a conventional PETG that's simply optimized for somewhat faster printing. Elegoo Rapid PETG also delivers a very convincing overall print, though with a bit more stringing than Creality Hyper PETG. The surface is a touch more matte than Creality's and also shows no signs of moisture. The honeycombs are a hair better than Creality's, but you only will notice under magnification. Even though Jayo's print quality is actually a bit better than Elegoo's, it was a complete fail in my test. Details, curves and honeycombs look fine overall, but despite 2 8-hour drying cycles, there are bubbles all over the print, a clear sign of residual moisture. The first print after just 1 drying cycle was a total disaster with lots of strings and bubbles. That's a shame because the surface look comes pretty close to the original PETG-HF. Same story with the Sunlu Highspeed Matte PETG. Here too, the honeycombs are nearly perfect, but there are small imperfections here and there on the details. On the plus side, there's no stringing, but unfortunately there still seems to be a bit of residual moisture. In the camera footage, I spotted the typical little bubbles that I didn't notice at the first glance. Even so, after this first test round, Sunlu is my favorite overall. It comes closest to the PETG-HF basket. But judging the differences in gloss just from the baskets wasn't as clear as on the spools themselves with this model. So I also printed this one to see much better how matte each filament really is. It's clear that Sunlu and Jayo have the mattest look of the 4 candidates. But Bambu Lab's PETG-HF takes it one step further. At first and even second glance, you wouldn't peg it as PETG. And that's especially obvious compared to Creality's Hyper PETG. Elegoo lands somewhere between the Creality and Bambu Lab PETG-HF. So, do we have a winner? The best replacement for Bambu Lab PETG-HF? We still need to cover price and sustainability. On the latter, Jayo is a fail because of its non-reusable plastic spool. Elegoo and Creality come on cardboard spools, which first aren't ideal if you use an AMS, and second end up in the trash anyway. In my view, Bambu Lab and Sunlu have the better concept. Both use reusable plastic spools. But does that make them more expensive? At the time of this video, I found the best prices for Jayo and Elegoo. Sunlu and Bambu Lab are mid-pack and Creality is the most expensive. But heads up, because promotions and bundles pop up all the time on Amazon, in the brand's own stores and with resellers, this is just a snapshot. With that settled, things seem pretty clear. And we could almost end the video here, right? Sunlu comes closest to PETG-HF, but you may need to invest a bit more drying time up front. If a bit more sheen and a cardboard spool are fine for you, Elegoo is a solid pick, and if you want compromise, you stick with PETG-HF. But after I basically wrapped up the tests, I made the mistake of digging a little bit deeper, meaning I checked the datasheet, and what I found honestly shocked me. On the key mechanical metrics, stiffness plus flexural and tensile strength, Bambu Lab PETG-HF lags clearly behind the tested alternatives. It tears, breaks and deforms under lower loads. Here, Sunlu and Jayo came out well ahead. Where PETG-HF could shine is the 50% higher impact strength than the competition, meaning it's a little bit less brittle and handles sudden impacts better. But as good as it sounds, this comparison gets really shocking when we put it up against a conventional, non-high-speed Sunlu PETG. That one has an impact strength of 17 kilojoules per square meter, and this is 3 to 4 times higher than the high-speed filaments tested here. Bottom line, among high-speed PETGs, Bambu Lab PETG-HF is still my top choice, and at least in this test, I didn't find a true replacement. Fortunately, Bambu Lab seems to have restocked in the meantime, but heads up, If you're looking for a material that's tougher than PLA, yet still relatively easy to print, then high-speed PETGs might not be your best bet. Thanks to the higher flowability, you can print faster, but the mechanical properties suffer. My recommendation: decide what you really need. And in the meantime, check out this video if you haven't had your fill of filament yet. Your subscription supports this channel. Thanks for watching and see you soon.